see what happens. All right, looks like everything looks good. I think we're on the air. Hopefully, can you maybe verify it just by looking?
Yes.
Anyway, glad to have you with us. My name is Norm Ellis. This is the Grace Baptist Church Adult 1 Bible Study. Glad to have you online as well as being here. Today we're going to be in Genesis chapter 9, or I think it's chapter 9. Yes, chapter 9. And we'll be looking at these 3 points here, verses 1 through 4, the blessing. The second one is the warning, 5 through 7, and verses 8 through 15, the covenant. And this is the last part of the 3-part we're doing on the flood. And the main thing today is that all people are to value all human life. I forgot to write one thing down on my board.
We're all good, Norm. We're all good.
All good. Today is also Sanctity of Human Life Day. And this is one day during the year that we try to find the marking pen that I keep dropping. Underneath here, on the other side, is a marking pen. Can you grab that for me?
If I said
there it is.
No.
Thank you very much. It got away, just kept on rolling. Anyway, one day out of the year that we take to remember the sacredness of human life. And today is that Sunday that we talk about those kind of things. And that's the tie-in with Noah and the ark. And we'll just dive into it. You'll get the connection in here in a little bit. Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you again for this opportunity we have to read your word, to study your word, to understand these things. And I just pray you to open our hearts and minds to these principles, Lord, that we're going to be talking about today. And help us remember that all life, all human life is precious to you. You value that, Lord. And I just pray that we remember those things. Be with those that are sick today. Help them get better, Lord. Be with those that are on their way here. Keep them safe as they're traveling, Lord. Thank you in your Son's name. Amen. Amen. So welcome to everybody who's back. Last week we weren't here. We had a little bit of snow and ice. A little bit, I should say. I had a lot of it. It was over a quarter of an inch of ice, just pure ice on top of the snow where I live in Hawkinson. So it was exciting. But last week we were on Zoom, or excuse me, no, it was on YouTube. It was like being on Zoom again. But I'm glad to be back with you guys here today in the class and those of you online again. So, I forgot to put up a poster. Oh, got it. Well, that's okay. Hold on just a moment. I think it's item number 5, which I believe I included in the handouts. But I meant to put it on the board, on the wall. And so, yeah, I got them. Might as well use them, right? There it is. A good teacher is always prepared. Unfortunately, you don't have a good teacher. You have so teacher.
I think we have a wonderful
Oh, well, thank you. Should have all my things in place. Wow, there's a giant poster they gave me, too. I'm just going to plop it right over this other, yeah, I'm going to put it right here. And I can't see it there. I'm going to cover the other poster with it. There we go. So now, we put this away, because somebody comes over and sits with me going, what the heck is this junk? See, if I'd been here earlier, I would remember to put the poster up. And so back to what we're doing. So today's study is entitled Protect with an exclamation mark. And there's a reason for that. We'll talk about that as well. The main idea today is that all people are to value all human life. Come on in. Glad to see
We
you
were
guys.
just talking about you. My ears were burning.
Were they burning?
She made us late. It's her
Glad.
fault.
You're right on time. We're just starting. I do have some verses. Who would like to do a nice long one? Any volunteers for? I see this hand here though, so I'll give you the
Next one.
I'll give you the next longest one. How about that?
That sounds good to me.
Anybody else want one? I have two more left.
I'll take one.
You got one? I don't want you to fight over it.
Polly will take
Okay, Polly. Okay, there you go.
I'll take this, Captain.
Right.
All righty. I'm glad to see people fighting over God's word in a good way. In a good way.
In a good way, okay.
Anyway, so to recap, today is Sanctity of Human Life Day. We emphasize the fact that we are of value to God, and we should be valuing human life. It's one day a year that we take out of to remember to do that, because there's so much in this world today that is people are not valuing human life. So it's important to remember that we should, right?
They had that March of Life on Saturday.
Just recently, yes.
Saturday?
Yes. It's a thing that they do this particular time of January, and so every year you'll see something like that. Anyway, so I got a couple of questions here for you. 3 questions here for you. The first one reads: what is your favorite outdoor reality show? Now I know you might say I never watched those, Norm, and I get that. They take a certain kind of personality who want to see these things. But some of you might have seen them and maybe have an opinion at least. So, do you have a favorite one?
Oh, Survival Guide.
Huh?
Survival Guide.
Survival Guy. I've heard of that too.
That's Les Stroud.
Mhm.
I think that's his name.
Yeah. I don't have time to watch very many of these things. So every once in a while I'll catch one or part of one, Anybody else?
Gator hunters down there.
Gator Hunters. All right. That's sort of a reality show. Right?
I don't know what the name of it is, but I like watching it.
Yeah. Any other favorite outdoor reality shows? There's one I think called Below Zero. I think I've watched it before. I think it's that, and I think it's they're out in Alaska or Canada somewhere, and a lot of times they're by themselves in a cabin somewhere, and they have to deal with all the rigors of living off by themselves. I might have got the name mixed up, but it was something like that. And usually, because I think the name is Below Zero. Anyway, it's usually in the wintertime.
Does Duck Dynasty count?
Yeah, Duck Dynasty's kind of a fun one. I used to watch it. I don't think it's sort of an outdoor reality show, yeah. Crocodile Hunter was kind of fun. I don't know if that was kind of a funny show too, until the guy died. But anyway, one of them is called Alone. One of them is called Life Below Zero. Oh, that maybe that's what I'm thinking about. Another one's called Dual Survival. Another one's called Survivor. You probably heard of Survivor before. And there's many others.
Naked and Afraid. I was like, oh, are you kidding me?
That's ridiculous.
I never.
You had to mention that one.
I never watched it, but I was like,
It's got to
I
be.
was shocked.
It's like
I
debauchery.
know.
It's like debauchery on display. I think.
Yes.
They need money.
Apparently, yeah, it gets the clicks. It gets people tuning in. But anyway, so there's a lot of those interesting shows. How would you feel being completely alone and on your own in the wilderness? How would you feel? What would be some of the emotions you might feel?
That would be a blessing for a lot of people.
Yes, that's true. Some people's personalities such they might covet that because they're never alone, right?
as long as I had Wilson with me, I'd
Wilson?
be okay.
Yes, there was that show.
Not Stowaway.
Not Stowaway.
Castaway.
Castaway, yeah. And Tom Hanks, I believe, was the star of
Yeah.
that. He was a Fed Express or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that was. I did find it interesting how he had to cope with being alone. That's a good point. Anyway, but how would you feel? I would be alone. I'd be lonely, obviously.
Mhm.
I would feel despair probably. What am I going to do? How am I going to survive? I don't have. Supposedly, a lot of times you don't have any tools.
You'll be stuck out by yourself.
Yeah, if you were in the castaway thing, that'd be really, really difficult. But most of these people have some rudimentary things like a knife or something like an axe and maybe matches or something. But it still would be, you have to really think about your survival. What those little things we take for granted. We take for granted we get in our nice car and go where we want to and come home again. Nice warm house and all that stuff. But sometimes it's not that way. I remember when I was a youngster, growing up in Port Orchard, and my dad was building our house. They won't let you do this nowadays, by the way. But we lived in the sticks, 5.5 acres of thick brush, heavy salal, huckleberry, cedar trees, you name it. It was just thick. It was like a jungle. It was cool. For me, a young boy growing up, it was like, I feel like I'm on my own, blazing trails, cutting through the huckleberries and stuff. Anyway, what was my point about that? Oh, yeah, the house. And he built the house. We didn't have power. We didn't have a furnace. We didn't have water. But we were inside the house. And nowadays, they probably wouldn't let you do that. But so he put an outhouse out about 100 feet out. And it wasn't even fancy. It didn't have a roof. So you would use the outhouse. It was a throne out in the wilderness. And you had to bring a raincoat most of the time in the wintertime. It was something that most people today would say, huh? We didn't have power, like I said, and didn't have furnace. So you get up in the morning, the last person at night would lay the fire, get it all set. And then the first person up would light the fire. Well, it was like freezing cold. And I'd get out of that. I said, I don't want to do that, but I had to get up and go to school and stuff. So I'd run in there, light the fire, run back in. I hear the crackle that's going through all the kindling and getting ready. Then I'd say, okay, it's warm enough. So I'd grab my clothes and dress in front of the fire. Those are days, But anyway, that's sort of what I think of when I think of these reality shows. It's that kind of environment again, back out by yourself and those kind of things. What would be positive about that kind of experience, do you think? What would be a positive?
You don't want that to happen again.
I positively don't want that to happen again, yes. Well, you learn to care of yourself, I suppose. You learn what's inside of you. If you're out in the Alaskan wilderness or something. You were going to say something?
You find out you are smarter, stronger, and better than what you thought you were because you made it through that situation.
And you have this sense of accomplishment. Wow. Yeah. I caught that fish. I can actually have fish for dinner instead of whatever it was, berries or something. Those kind of things. What would be a negative about it, though? What would be a negative about it?
I just don't want to do that again.
I'm too used to creature comforts. I am spoiled now. I think back to when I was a kid growing up in that situation I told you about, and I thought, we had to go down to the creek to get water. That's how we were. They'd go down, luckily they had a creek. We had no water yet. It was like amazing. Robinson Crusoe. Ever read that book?
Yes.
I've never read that book, but we got it on CD. And as we went across to Missouri and back, we listened to the unabridged Robinson Crusoe being read by some English guy. And it was an amazing story. Teresa and I listened to that all the way out and coming back. But then there's Swiss Family Robinson. I love that Disney movie. But I digress. Thinking back on those things is kind of fun, right? Sometimes. Anyway, so once they left the ark, we're finishing up on the flood, right, with Noah. Once they left the ark, Noah and his family were literally the only humans on earth. They had to begin the process of rebooting humanity. Now, that's a nice way of saying restarting, right? We would say rebooting. But God had some specific rules, especially about respecting human life. We're going to talk about that today. So, I think I did open the prayer already. Yes, good. Just reading the first paragraph here, give us some start here. It says, we are constantly bombarded with stories of pain and suffering. Likewise, in the Bible, there are accounts of pain and suffering as well, such as the flood account and God's judgment on humanity and the earth that is recorded in Genesis 6-7. However, we must realize that in the Bible, the message of ruin and judgment is accompanied by a message of hope and restoration to those who trust in God. And we're going to discover that as we read through Genesis chapter 8. We're in page 64, starts on page 64 for the thing if you'd like to follow along. I'll be referring to a couple of things in there. But anyway, so going on. So each of the sins listed is a reflection of disrespect for human life. When we look back at the different things that humankind was doing before the flood, right? And the different things we talked about in prior sessions. What would our world look like if all people valued every human life? What do you think our world would look like?
Our attitude would be different.
Our attitudes, yeah, yes, for sure, yeah.
We could almost eliminate the police force.
Yep.
Or
Yeah,
severely
Yeah.
downplay, right?
They wouldn't be worried about enforcing things because they would be violating laws. You know, they'd just be worried about getting cats out of trees or something, I guess.
Fire department.
They'd be part of the fire department, yeah. But it would be a utopia, wouldn't it? Think about the Garden of Eden, right? And that was the perfect situation that God had created for mankind, and until mankind sinned. So in today's study, we're going to look at God's directions for Noah's family, and we're going to consider how His words challenge us to promote and protect the sacred nature of all human life. Like I said, we're kind of combining things. We're summing up Noah and the flood and all that stuff, and the restarting of humanity. But we're also talking about how that relates to the sanctity of human life. So let's go ahead and look at our verses today. Now, the first one we're going to be looking at is verses 1 through 4 of Genesis chapter 9. We're in Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 through 4, to begin with, our first point. And it's called the blessing. The blessing. Noah and his family, along with the animals, had exited the ark after more than a year. We talked about this last week, if you were with us last week, right? Over a year in that cramped area. Now, an ark was huge. I know that. But there was animals and stuff for the animals all over the place. Every possible place, I'm sure, was being utilized. And you can imagine the chaotic nature of that kind of thing. I think that perhaps God maybe used some sort of power of His to cause people to cause the animals to go into a state of hibernation, perhaps. I don't know. We don't know how He did this, but perhaps something like that. But we do know that Noah was supposed to take care of them, and He's supposed to put in provisions for them. So it was probably pardon the pun, a real zoo. I know, waiting for that one here. So anyway, we have some things in our handouts today, and I just want to refer to them. Handout number 1, of course, we'll be going through some things. But there's also the background of Genesis. That's handout number 2. For those of you who got, we do have an email that is sent out by Pastor Matthew, and he will attach this handout to it. So if you online want to get a copy of that, you can contact Grace Baptist Church, Pastor Matthew, and tell him, please put me on the list to get the Adult 1 Bible study notes, and he'll make sure you do. But anyway, handout number 2 is the background of Genesis. It talks about the purpose, the writer and date, the organization of it, the themes of it, the creation, sin, judgment and grace, and covenant, and faith and obedience. And we're kind of talking about the judgment and grace part here with the story of Noah, right? And also the covenant that God made with Noah, and the faith and obedience that we see exhibited by Noah. And that's where that part comes in. We also have handout number 3, the Christian and social order, which looks surprisingly like the poster I put up over here. Those of you online probably can't see the whole thing. I apologize for that. But it's just a poster that talks about the Christian and social order. And when I get to that point, I'll read that out loud. And the last one is covenants in Genesis. And I've already circled the one we're talking about today. It's the Noahic. There we go. Noahic, which means referring to Noah, right? Mm-hmm. And the description of the covenant is that God promised to never destroy the earth by flood again, and the rainbow was a sign of His promise. Now, I know we talked about some of these things last week a little bit as well. But you know what? As they say, repetition is
good for the soul.
Good for the soul sometimes, right? So we'll refer to these things again as needed. But what might the Noah and his family, what might they have thought or feared or experienced as they left the ark? Kind of put yourself in their shoes. What do you think they might have thought after God told them, okay, now go out?
We've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Just think of the destruction that they probably saw. You know, probably was horrendous.
And hearing people's voices outside the ark saying, "Let me in, let me in."
Yeah. That was when the flood first started. But now they're all
you turned it.
Yeah, they're all gone. So now we're at the end, right?
Yeah.
And now the ark is settled, and they're coming out for the first time. What would you have thought?
The earth is new.
This is a scary thing. Mm-hmm. Everything's gone that I knew, right? You know,
they have to rebuild.
Yeah, the towns, their houses, all gone. Roads that they may have used, perhaps, let's say, gone. All those things, all the people they knew, gone.
So where did the ark rest?
On the mountains of Ararat, it says.
So they had to come down.
Probably did. Yeah. Now it doesn't mean on the. Okay. One of the myths of Noah's Ark is you see is this ark way on top of this very tip top of a mountain sitting there. That's probably not what happened. It was probably on the lower areas of a mountain range. That's what most people theorize because that makes sense. It says on the mountains of, just like you'd say on the mountains of the Cascades, the foothills of the Cascades or something like that. And that was very possibly what it was. So was it high on the top of a craggy mountain? Probably not. But you see those pictures all the time, don't you? Yeah.
Teetering.
Yeah, teetering. Right. It was probably, down in the foothill areas of a mountain
It
range.
came rest in a very secure location.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
It did. It was a huge vessel. Remember that, like a big giant barge. I've seen all kinds of pictures of these arcs. We talked about this once before, where you see a nice curved bow with this almost like an icebreaker front to it, and the comes back, curves back, so nice and look. Probably wasn't that at all. Probably a big giant rectangular box with some ballast in the bottom. And probably some venting at the very top. And we know it was huge. It was a huge structure. And it was made to be floated above the judgment. God took these righteous people, Noah and his family, and kept them above that wrath that was on the whole earth. It's an amazing picture if you think about it. How God took care of them and the animals.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. So they probably had these kind of thoughts, right? What kind of fears do you think they maybe had? Going on this brand new world.
Get food?
Yeah,
Where's
where we're going to
the
eat.
food?
Yeah,
You know?
where we're going to live. We have no structure to live in. Maybe they lived in the ark for a little bit. I don't know. We don't know.
That's a good possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the only shelter around for a while. What kind of experience do you think what kind of things that they went through as they left the ark? Well, that'd be some experience
Probably
with it.
scared.
Probably scared.
Yeah. Very scared.
Even though they were the only ones, that was still probably, scary.
Survival was probably number one, of course. Shelter, food, those kind of
Well,
things.
they had shelter.
Perhaps.
They had the ark. I mean, it was,
But if they started to spread out, they'd have to live somewhere too.
yeah, once they
But
left the ark.
I think you're probably right. I mean, I would. God didn't say don't do it. I'd live for a while in the ark till I could build a house somewhere.
And
Might
it
as
just
well.
Just didn't disappear and go away.
Yeah.
Everybody got off of it.
But it was,
Well, and they could have even used some of the ark to start structures.
that's true too. They could have scavenged some of the material off that.
Yeah.
Which is a good point. Anyway, so let's talk about the first point, the blessing. And this is Genesis 9, verses 1 through 4. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Genesis chapter 9, look at verses 1 through 4. And for these first 4 verses, I want you to listen for God's instructions to Noah and his family. And who has number 1?
I've got it.
All right, go ahead and read that for us, please.
And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give all to you as I gave the green plant. Only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood.
Okay, now, I just realized I read the wrong intro paragraph. I don't know why. So I'm going to read the correct one this time, and then we'll go over these
But you
verses.
said where you were at.
Yeah. But I'm actually supposed to be page 73. It says, history demonstrates that human beings have a propensity to devalue others. We see that all the time, don't we? Prejudice, sometimes based on skin color or ethnicity, is one of the manifestations of this. You also see child abuse, sexual abuse, spousal abuse, neglect of the elderly, abortions, bullying. And I also put down that we sometimes devalue the handicapped also, right? And maybe the poor, perhaps, too. Likewise, there's expressive and devaluing of human life. These are all. In Genesis 9, God declares that He values all human life, and so should we. It's such a great intro paragraph. I want to make sure we read it. So I realized, you did the wrong one. I said, no, we got to go back. Anyway, so looking again at these verses that were so excellently read there by Joe. What do we see here in in verse 1? What is the focus of verse 1, do you think? Let's look at verse 1 again.
God blessed Noah and his sons,
Mm-hmm.
and then said to be fruitful and multiply.
And fill the earth. Yeah. So this is called the blessing that God gave Noah. He experienced this devastating period of time where the earth was destroyed, and now he has to go into the earth with his family and rebuild everything. And so God is blessing him, giving him this blessing here. And he's saying some things to them that will give them what?
Strength, hope.
Strength, hope. That's encouragement. Yeah, all those things, right? If you're looking, if you wondered what's going to happen to me, okay, and God tells you, says, I want you to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That would give you some hint that, hey, we have a future, right? That we're going to be not experiencing God's wrath. Instead, we're going to be experiencing his blessing. Think about that. That God Almighty was blessed. Because God was talking to them here at this point. So that's a great thing, isn't it?
Yes.
So this act of a blessing is a prominent theme in Genesis. We see this all through Genesis in various places. And he bestows prosperity and empowerment also. And fruitfulness for the land and the people that are alive and the animals, is by extension also, by the way. And those who receive his blessing actually attain all these things that God has promised them. In these things, God is a source of blessing, even should he choose to use others as an instrument of blessing. But God's blessing of Noah echoes the blessing we see later before to Adam, right? To be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, right? It's the second time. Now, what could you call Adam then? Adam.
No.
What could you call Noah then?
The second Adam?
Hey! Go figure. I gave away the answer. Oh,
I
man.
was waiting. I'm like, okay, what is? Okay.
So you know, we think all the time, well, yeah, we're descended from Adam. Well, we're also descended from Noah. Everyone is descended from Noah.
Mhm.
And we sometimes forget that. So, because he's, in a sense, the second Adam, I don't want to say he's actually the second Adam, because who do we know as the second Adam?
Jesus.
All right, I thought I was going to stump somebody here. You're on track. He is considered the second Adam, the second representative who did the right thing, right? But in a sense, Noah is, again, stepping in the shoes of Adam here, right? And he is being that person that God's going to instruct. And so the same things that God said to Adam are being now echoed to Noah.
Mm-hmm.
You think that's a responsibility that really weighed heavy on Noah, perhaps? Maybe. Now remember, he was a very obedient man. He walked and he talked with the Lord, it says.
But he had his family to help him too.
That's true. Yeah. But this is the second time we see this repeated then from the time of Adam as well. What about verse 2 though? So verse 2, what's that?
I was talking to her. That's good.
Oh, I just read mine.
There should have been one for you there.
There was. We just
Oh,
moved
okay.
it when I sat down.
So verse 2 changes the tone a little bit here. What does it say in verse 2 that kind of gives us an idea that something's different now?
Well, I think it kind of reminds Noah that sin was in the earth, and because the animals' behavior is going to change.
Uh-huh.
God commanded them to go to Noah. They didn't buck up against the grain. They didn't bite him and all this stuff. But now you see that they are going to be in the fear of him and his family.
Mm-hmm.
So
It wasn't that way before.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that way before.
The animals looked to man as that steward from God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in the sense is what we gather from the verses, and so there wasn't this fear. Nowadays, what do you see when you come across a deer in the wilderness? What's the first thing that deer does? Does it sidle up to you and want to be petted? No,
Looks at you and runs off.
it runs the other way. I was walking one time up in the hills where Large Correction Center is, La Center area, and during lunchtime we went for a walk. Right, so I'm walking up this logging book, old logging book. And as I'm coming around this corner, I see a black bear eating berries. And I saw it a second before it saw me. As soon as it saw me, I was scared of it, of course, for a second. I said, like this, and it turned and saw me. It went. I never knew bears could run that fast. They're fast critters. So if you ever think you're going to outrun a bear, good luck with that. Good luck.
Times like that I'm thankful that animals are afraid of us.
Yeah.
Cougar is bear.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Most animals do have a fear of man. Now, I'm not saying all do. There's always those exceptions. There'll be rogue elephants or tigers or lions that will do terrible things to people. And what we usually do is we try to hunt them down and put them out, right?
Usually there's a reason for that, too.
Yes.
Like it's sick or
It
it's,
could be.
you know.
It could be that way. Mountain lions sometimes attack people. I've heard of that happening before.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a principle that's going to be talked about here. But the fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky and everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish in the sea. Into your hand they are given. So what is that view showing us as well?
We still have stewardship over them.
We do. That's right.
Even though our relationship with them has changed.
Yes, we do.
They still fear they fear us at this point, and what? Yeah, I don't know what I wanted to say. I lost it.
Well,
Yeah, it'll come back.
into your hand they are given. That's kind of the clue there, I think. That's telling us what, do you think?
We have responsibility.
Yeah. You are still a steward, okay? And you are still over the top of them. You are still above them, is what it's saying, right? In my Bible commentary notes, it says here, into your hands is another way of saying, literally under your authority. These words were later used to describe the victories that God gave to Israel over their enemies. Although human beings could face mortal attacks by many animals, the fear that God placed in animals provides a safeguard against such attacks. Humanity's docile dominion over animals before the flood changed from that point on. Man now rules over the animals primarily through force and fear. So we see a change in attitudes. The flood caused this as well. Why do you think maybe it caused that? I mean, we can theorize. Of course, God was the instigator, right? Any other reasons why?
They were starting a new humanity, if you will, you know. The animals' behavior was different. Earth was new. You know, they saw experiences they had never seen or had prior to the flood. You know, it's got to start over, kids.
I've always understood more or less that something dramatic changed about the climate. And
that could be too.
But you look at just even the age that people lived. They're living to be near 1,000 years old. After the flood, you see them slowly working down. Slowly working down. You've got Abraham is like the 140 or so. His sons around that, and his grandson around the same time. Get down to Joseph. He dies a little bit younger. He had more of a traumatic childhood, of course. But then after that, you know, most of the time people aren't living much longer than about 80 to 120-ish. You know, it's a rough estimate. There was a priest who lived to be 140 in the days of the divided kingdom. But yeah, there's something about the climate changed where I think that certain animals would die out, certain plants were gone, and God knew that for a balanced diet we would need to eat more than what we used to.
Well, that brings us to the next thing. And we talked about this before. We talked about survival shows and such, right?
Yeah.
You have to sometimes eat stuff that maybe you've not. Let's say you don't like fish, but you're in a survival thing, and you have to live, right? And the only thing you can catch is that salmon that's going upstream in front of you. You're going to learn to eat salmon.
That sounds good tonight.
And if you're
Where's the smoker?
So you're going to eat those things, right? And that's what basically happened. This is what a lot of people believe. Like you were saying, the climate also changed. And there's other things that people theorize. I don't want to get deep into that. We kind of talked about that last week. But that verse 3 says, every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give all to you as I gave the green plant. So right away, that statement says you're no longer a vegan only. You now can eat any of these things as well. So does that maybe make the animals also a little leery of humans when they're real? Hey, what happened to Joe? He was here a minute ago.
Am I making them afraid? God gave,
I think there'd be a fear just based on that alone.
God
wouldn't
gave
it?
them a sporting chance.
That's true. That's
He
true.
gave them a sporting chance. He's like, I'm going to make you afraid of them now, so now you run.
Mm-hmm.
Make them work for the food.
Now, there's a principle, though, that comes up right here in verse 4. What is that principle? It says, only you shall not eat flesh with its life. That is, its blood. What is that all about? Do you think?
Don't eat raw meat.
Because
Don't eat raw meat. You're going to say?
I was gonna say in the blood, that's where all the impurities are.
Okay.
He gave that same thing to the Jewish people when he was establishing his covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Don't eat this.
Mm-hmm.
Don't eat the blood.
There's
Don't eat the ones that's
health concerns
Yeah.
with eating blood. And I don't disagree with that. Oh, that's entirely true. But here we see some symbolism, too.
Yeah, he actually applies it, in the text, right, where he says, the blood represents the life.
Yeah.
And you need to honor the fact that you have killed something. There's something significant.
This is to remind us that this is an important thing.
Mhm.
That life is an important thing. It's a principle showing here.
You
Okay.
shouldn't just wanton go and kill animals. For
No.
fun. There's an element there. And of course, it relates. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. It relates to humanity in a very similar way. The blood represents life.
Yeah.
I have a spot on my glasses,
No.
and I can't abide spots on my glasses, so it's coming off.
Oh, you wouldn't like my glasses. No, they're abrasions.
Anyway, well, the key word, one of the key words they talk about in the commentary is lifeblood. One of the translations uses that term, I think. But eating raw meat containing blood was strictly prohibited. Now, it's strictly prohibited also in the Mosaic Law even further. It codified it. It's a $10 word. It means it was listed. It was written down.
Put into the laws of the nation.
Yes. This restriction would be brought out in the Mosaic Law and talks about Leviticus 17 and Deuteronomy 12. And is rooted in the sanctity of life. Even though God gave permission to kill animals for food, life, symbolized by blood, was still sacred to God and had to be treated with respect. And I think it goes along with what you saying, the wanting killing of things. That was disrespecting God's creation when you did that. It says the law would be very precise about animal sacrifices and the butchering of animals for food. What was true for animals, an animal life, takes on even greater significance for human life. Humans are God's what? Highest creation, right? Highest creation. Made in whose image? God's own image. Think about that. By the way, quick question, Tina. Were you able to do the tennis thing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I didn't even notice. Thank you. Anyway, so we were made in his own image. The animals were made in his image. We were. So the sanctity of their lives from conception to the grave is paramount. This prohibition, here we go, precedes the Mosaic Law by several centuries, indicating that the sanctity of life was always part of God's design. And that's an important thing to remember, is that at the very beginning, we were a special creation by God. Because when he created the heavens and the earth, when he created the trees and the herbs and all that stuff, when he created all the different animals, he said what after every time? It was good. But when he created humans, what did he say? It was very good. Very good. Now, he's probably talking about all of creation along with humans, but it was at that point that he said those words. So we are made in the image of God, and we are part of God's design, and that's why this is in here, to show us, to remind us of that aspect of it. The blood is that symbol of that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Hopefully it makes sense.
What can wash away my sins?
What can wash away my sins? Now let's talk about the sacrifice of Christ. Then.
I know, but this is the foundation for the symbolism in the New Testament. Why do you see such emphasis on the blood of Jesus in the New Testament and even in our songs?
Yes.
It goes all the way back to this moment with Noah and how God, said the life of the animal, the life of the human, is represented by the blood.
Yes.
And we are covered by the blood of Christ, and that symbolism all.
Yes. No, you're exactly right. You're exactly
It
right.
all comes back to this.
That's key to that. Remember that. So anyway, God called us to be what of the things he provided? Stewards. And I love the fact you remember that word. Mm-hmm. Steward means somebody who's in charge of something, to keep it right. All right? To make sure it runs well, does things correct, whatever. On railroad cars, they have stewards. On boats, they have stewards. And a steward was somebody who would make sure things are done correctly and taken care of.
In very fancy theaters, the restroom might have a steward.
That's right. They might. Yeah. But anyway, God has called us all to be wise stewards in all the things he provides. And related to that is a respect for human life. We are to do that as well. To emphasize the incredible value of human life, God issued specific instructions in the event of the loss of human life. And this is where we're going to go into here even more on the value of human life. So let's look at the second point now. It's called the warning. The warning. And in these next three verses, I want you to listen for God's instructions related to human life. Who has number 2?
I do.
Go ahead and read that for us.
Surely I will require your lifeblood. From every beast I will require it. And from every man, and from every man's brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth abundantly, and multiply in it.
Wow. There's a lot of stuff in these short verses, isn't there? So let's look at the first verse here, verse 5. What does it say? What does God promise here?
Surely I will require your lifeblood.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, is there what? There's accountability, isn't it? Each one of us are accountable. You know, we might say, well, I'm not involved in murdering anything. It doesn't involve me. No, it does. It involves each one of us, right? We are all accountable, and we should be accountable for these things. That's why it's a duty to be on a jury, you know, because that is a process by which we adjudicate a case where maybe there's been a capital crime or something like that. But it says surely, and it's not talking about Shirley Temple. No. For sure, I'm just joking. I will require your lifeblood. From every beast I will require it as well. Okay, what does that mean?
And if the beast kills, then the beast dies too.
There's a principle of law that is involved in that. Did you know that? If an animal is involved in killing a human, that usually that animal is put down. Okay, and that's where it comes from. It comes from this idea way back in the time of Noah, and it was codified, if you will. I know that fancy word again. Basically listed down in the Mosaic Law, where it had all these regulations and stuff about in Leviticus specifically, where if this happens, you do this, and if that happens, you do that. And one of the things is if an ox gores and kills somebody, that ox, and I think its owner, must have to give an account.
The owner, if the ox had a habit of goring,
Right.
and the owner did nothing about it.
And that's
so
true.
if he was negligent and he knew it was a dangerous
That was the
animal,
inference.
now
yes.
well, it spells it out even in
Yes.
Deuteronomy. And then it gives you 2 case studies there. It's great.
So
Yeah.
nothing is going by without God covering it.
So that would be the case then. If an animal did something like that, they would have to also give their blood up for that. Now, so again, the principle of sanctity of human life, I would, this is me, but I would insert the word innocent human life. Because otherwise, why would we have capital punishment? Right?
Well, capital punishment comes after a person has been at a crime and convicted of it.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I don't personally think there's any innocent human being on the face of the earth.
Well, but from that kind of a crime of taking a human life. Though.
Right, right. That is deserving of punishment
Right.
because God specifically says that if you're convicted of killing somebody,
Your
you
life,
murdered somebody, your life
you're
is forfeited.
forfeited as well.
And I would say, even from the biblical perspective, God does view a murderer's life as having dignity and sanctity.
Yes.
You go back to the story of Cain and Abel. When Cain murdered his brother,
Yes.
God
Mercy.
actually protects Cain because it is not. It is an insult to the Maker to murder even a murderer.
Mhm.
But again, knowing how great evil is, you guys looked at that week when I was gone. This the extraordinarily evil amount of sin. God ends up instituting death penalty as a permissible way now, even commanded way, to hold human sin in check. Because if not, just we do murder rampantly, and so even a murderer's life is. God is not delighted with it when he dies, to quote Ezekiel.
Yeah, you don't just take a murder. Even if a murder is convicted, you don't just take him and take a knife and just cut him up into pieces or something like that. That would be disrespectful.
Yeah.
And so you have to do even the thing of capital punishment. If you agree or disagree, now there's people that agree and disagree on both. I'm not saying you're wrong either way. I'm just laying out what it says.
Yeah.
But it does say here that that's required of you.
Oh, yeah.
And if when you look at the 10 Commandments. It says thou shalt not kill, which is actually incorrect. It's thou shalt not murder.
Yes.
Is the correct.
There are 2 different words
Right.
in Hebrew.
Because if you take that correct, then how come later on, just in that same book, in that same I think the chapter after it or something like that talks about if you kill somebody, you must forfeit your life. So it doesn't make sense then. See what I'm saying? So that's why the word, I would put innocent human life in there. That's the only reason I was saying. I didn't mean to start a controversy.
No,
Anyway.
Great conversation though.
Yeah, it's a good conversation because that does come up, doesn't it?
to me, all human life is sacred. Period. Even though the guy who commits murder is a sleaze bag, and deserving of what he gets, he's still a human being.
He is still
And he still is one of God's creations.
Look at the change here in between verse 6 and 7, though. He's talking about what? Somebody killing somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in verse 7, but as for you.
Let's
Now who is the as for you?
Talking about Noah.
Noah and his family. Who was Noah again in God's eyes?
He was the new Adam, so to speak.
And he was righteous,
Right.
right? He walked and talked with God, right? It says, but as for you. In other words, he's talking, I think this is looking forward, okay, my opinion. As for the righteous people among you, you're not the murderers, okay? Be what? Fruitful and multiply. Populate the earth abundantly and multiply it. Again, he's repeated this. It's the second time now.
And it's such a contrast, right? I mean, the first
It
one
is.
is people killing people. The next phrase is, I want you to multiply.
Right.
I don't want you to murder and destroy each other. I want you to expand and be fruitful and healthy and have,
Mm-hmm. Anyway, we have a poster that talks about the Christian social order here. I said I was going to read it because I know everybody online can't see it. It's also part of our handouts. So if you have a copy of handouts, it's handout number 3. So if you want to look at that, you can. And I'll go ahead and read it. In the spirit of Christ, Christians should oppose racism. We should work to provide for the orphan, the needy, the abused, the aged, the helpless, and I would include the handicapped and the sick. We should speak on behalf of the unborn and contend for the sanctity of all human life from conception to natural death. Now, these are very interesting words. Where do you think they came from?
I can tell you.
I know. If you read real carefully, it says down the bottom, the Baptist faith and message. So this is not a creed we're talking about here. This is a what was the word for that?
Statement of faith.
Statement of faith. It's
So
part of
we say we generally agree
Right.
with this on this with each other.
almost all Southern Baptists got together and they say, I agree with this. Okay, this statement. Among with many others, by the way, not just on this subject, but other things. And this is one of the things that they agree on in the Baptist Faith and Message of 2000 is this statement here. I think most Christians could probably believe that no matter what group you belong to, right? I
The
think,
outworkings of it will change.
because this is based on what the verses we've been reading, right?
Yeah, you see Jesus do it.
Yeah.
I saw an article that it said, and I didn't go back and look everything up,
Mm-hmm.
that if every church found a home for one homeless child,
Uh-huh.
that either in foster care or on the streets or whatever, that it would eliminate children without a family.
Well, yeah, I'm sure it would.
Did you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know personally of families aching for children in their family, but they can't. They're not able to have children, and it just breaks my heart to hear of all of the kids that are abused and all the babies that are aborted, because God loves them, and we should love them as well. Anyway, I need to go on. So after God delivered Noah and his family, He made a special promise. Okay, special promise. Let's look at this one. Wait a minute. Nope, I forgot. Exodus 21:22-25, number 3. Before you read that, these commands came before the law of Moses, which also provided detailed instructions for respecting human life, including the unborn. Go ahead and read those verses.
If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, and bruise for bruise.
So the basic principle we're talking about here is for the unborn, right? So is the unborn valued as well?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So that's included in God's plan as well. These are the words that Moses was told by God, and he shared with the rest of the Israelites.
In essence, you're going to love when you look at the law. These are case studies that God gives His people, examples for the courts to use in determining, if this is applicable here. So in that specific case study, he's pointing out a child that is injured in the womb.
Mhm.
That is something you need to give the consequence to.
Exactly.
And so, even in this case study, he's saying, the woman's affected, the child's affected, the man, all these situations.
Yes.
And then he gives a general principle that's restated about 4 times in the law. The life for life, tooth for tooth. So people are like, well, babies don't have teeth without it. It's a general principle.
No, it's an analogy.
He's using this as a case study, as an example, and then he gives the general principle of, here's the, what we would call, I guess, limitation of consequences. So there's a better legal term for that. But basically, if I knock out your tooth, you can't kill me. The max I can do is a tooth knockout. And the courts would have to determine what is equivalent to that in financial cost or whatever.
And then, of course, Jesus took that principle and said, wait a minute. Now, I give you a new commandment. And one of the things he said was, if somebody strikes you on the cheek, what are you supposed to do?
Turn the other cheek.
Don't hit him again.
Yeah.
Turn the other cheek.
Well, it was meant for a limitation of consequence. The Jews used for permission as permission for revenge.
Uh-huh.
And Jesus is like, you're totally mixing the point. This is not permission for revenge. That's not the people that I've called you to be.
Yeah.
This is a
And we're
limitation.
talking also civil law.
Yes.
Versus an interpersonal difference between two people, right? That need to be resolved. So, anyway. We need to go on to the last part because we're going to run out of time here. So, number 4 is our last one, and it's called the covenant. The covenant. And for the last 8 verses, I want you to look for the promise that God made to Noah and all humanity. Well, this is going to be a tough one. I hope we can answer this one. Who has number 4 for me? Oh, you got it.
And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, And I, behold, I establish a covenant with you and your seed after you, and every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast on the earth. I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more of the waters of a flood, neither shall there be any more a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, Thus is a token of my covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token or a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you, every living creature of all flesh, and the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh.
So, just so I don't forget to do this part, but they had gone through such a cataclysmic event. The dark clouds had formed, the rain had poured out upon the earth, right? And so now they're out of the ark. If you were them, what would you think when you saw dark clouds forming?
I think I'm going to stay near the ark.
You'd have dread, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
That's
You're not going to be filling the earth if you're afraid of the rain.
Yeah.
but what did God set in the sky now for them to see?
Rainbow.
The rainbow. Have you seen a rainbow? Have you seen a rainbow so bright that it almost looks like it's right there? I have. Where's that pot of gold? You know. And I've seen the rainbows with a double rainbow.
I think that's beautiful.
And I've also seen pictures of multiple rainbows. It usually happens near lakes or bodies of water where you get refractions that actually project up. And that's an amazing, I've never seen one in person. I've seen pictures of them. They weren't Photoshop, they were actual pictures. But anyway, this is a promise, right? And its promise is based on this word covenant again. We talked about covenant a couple of times already. You remember, what is a covenant? Let's look real quick in the handout. Number 1, the first page. Covenant is defined as a usually formal, solemn, and binding agreement between 2 or more persons to do or not to do something specific. It means a coming together, and it presupposes 2 or more parties who come together to make a contract, agreeing on promises, stipulations, privileges, and responsibilities. Specifically, it is commonly used in legal, like an HOA, right? Social, like a marriage, and religious and theological contexts. There's covenants. In the Bible, it's primarily referred to as a binding agreement between God and his people. Covenants show God's true and loyal nature. If he says he will do something, he will not break that promise. And to remind them of that, he used the rainbow in the sky as that symbol, right?
Most covenants have some form of a symbol.
Yes,
The
yes.
pinky swear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, circumcision later on becomes covenant for Abraham.
But God is promising to establish, it says, and to keep this covenant of not destroying the earth again by water. So would that be a comfort to Noah and his family?
Oh, yeah.
Should be a comfort to us. Now we have local flooding and stuff like that. I was involved in an area at one time where a levee broke and the whole town got flooded. But there's not going to be any more giant floods over the earth. You know, that's comforting to Noah and his family. It's comforting to us as well.
So
I've seen
was the whole earth covered, not just where Noah was, but the whole earth
the whole
was?
earth.
The Bible says the whole earth was covered, all the mountains were covered. Now, as far as the people who talk about these things, sometimes they'll say, well, you know, we are scientists, and we think that this probably didn't happen and all this stuff. But God can do what He wants to do. You know, God split the Red Sea. You know, God can cause the Jordan River to stop, and people went on a dry land
Yeah,
as
the
well.
archaeologists
So-
have found shells
At highest stratus.
at high altitudes in mountains.
And I've been told that over most of the earth there is one area of strata that seems to have an inordinate number of seashells and things like that. I'm not spreading a rumor or myth or anything that you probably haven't heard before. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But in most places they seem to find that one layer like that seems to be similar to the other layers. So could that be evidence of a worldwide flood? Sure, it could be. Were the mountains very high back then? We don't know. We see these big, giant, high mountains. We don't know that. They might have been small ones. So how much water would it take to do it? I'm not going to theorize. But all I know is what God said. And God said that it happened. And so my personal belief is it was not a local flood. That's what some people like to say. I think God caused a catastrophic thing on the whole earth
Well,
for the reason of judgment, just like He said.
He did say He killed all life on earth.
That's right. Yep. Except for those who are saved above the judgment, right?
Yep.
So let's look at these three areas that we talked about. Christians are to be what of God's provision? Stewards, right? Be a good steward, I would even put that in there. Second point is Christians are to stand up for those who have been murdered. There should be an accounting, right? And the third point is Christians are to reflect God's values and priorities in His creation. We see God also, He judged those things that were evil, right? But He also extended what? Mercy, right? And grace. Was Noah a perfect man?
No.
No, he was not. But God looked upon him and realized this is a righteous man. And this is a man that I can rebuild this world upon. And that what a thing that would be responsibility for him. So the challenge from today's lesson is to see how God's grace is extended to all, not just Noah, but all of us, right? Who would receive Him, and also identify people who are devalued and to consider how we can minister to them as well. So in your day-to-day activities, think about this. What are some ways that we can reflect the value that God places on people? What are some ways we can do it? I'm not asking you to answer. Just think about that, right? Are there ways we can do that? Where are your values and priorities different from God's? We need to examine our lives and see, are we on track with what God has said, what God has shown us in His Word, like in the story that we talked about of Noah? And if not, what needs to change? Well, I would say us, right?
Yeah.
We should, right? So look for those things. Let's have a word of prayer. We'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity we had to study your Word. Thank you for this 3-part study on Noah and how we see that you value life, Lord, and you demand an accounting for things like these, Lord. And I just pray that we would also value human life in our lives as much as we have influence, Lord. And that we would remember that these things are sacred to you, that we were made in your image. And the value that you place on us is so high, Lord. Help us to reflect that in our life as well. And I just pray that we'd also represent your character, your truths, Lord, to others that need to understand those things in their life as well. Thank you in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
So I want to thank you all for being here today. This is Grace Baptist Church, the Adult One Bible Study. And bye. God bless you all.
God bless you.
Oh, that's wonderful.